She's like a pilgrim, isn't she? Oh yeah. Are we going live? Are we live now? Hi! Come on down to Scottsdale. We've got 2 minutes to get here. We're about to start. Hard to wait. Thanks for being with us. Yay! Poison pen rocks.
Stand, but I can't seem to take it apart, so you're going to put up with me. Thank you so much for coming out today. I'm Barbara Peters. I'm the owner of the Poison Pen, and I'm delighted to welcome you here. In addition to you, our live audience, we're actually going to do this event on Facebook Live. So I want to thank our Facebook audience for attending. If you decide you want to share this event, you could now get out your phone for two purposes. One, I want you to turn off the ringer. If you don't know how, ask our crack IT staff at the back table. And two, if you go to the Poison Pen Facebook page, are you now live, Mom? Yes. If you go to the Poison Pen Facebook page, you can share the video that's on to your Facebook page right now. Think about how many more people will enjoy this event if you do this one simple act. Isn't that clever? Oh, look, some of you are actually doing it. This is a learning curve for all of us. And in case you're feeling somewhat inferior here at the moment, I will tell you that I have never been on Facebook. We have a very good staff. They do Facebook and Twitter. I stay home and write the e-news to you, right? That's my so. Each to his own, and I particularly want to give a shout out over here to Miles, who got pitched into doing this new technology with virtually with absolutely no background or training. And I'm telling you a moment or two, if some of you were here for the Daniel Silva event, you may recall that just 20 minutes into it, as she was using her phone, her own personal phone, and her own minutes for Facebook Live, because we didn't know how to do that, every phone in the room, whether it was turned off or not, went on. It was a haboom warning. Daniel and I had just segued to Morocco in the landscape of his book, and he shot up off his chair, and I said to him, hey, we're in Morocco, and here we have a local haboom. Anyway, hopefully that will not happen. Now, just a couple of housekeeping things that I need to make you aware of. Louise has been kind enough to sign all of the books ahead of time, so your copy of Glass Houses should have a signature in it. If you do not want to stay for the signing line, you can wave goodbye and depart when we are done. If you do want to stay for the signing, this is the signing table, and the line is going to go along that wall. And I will say, and I know you're better than this, but it's our experience, that no system for organizing a signing line at an off-site event has ever worked. It's like kindergarten. So you just have to make your own place in the line. I'd like to call you by rows, but people aren't good. So the best strategy for some of you, just stay seated and wait until the line kind of calms down. So does anyone have any questions about how this will go? I'm going to introduce Louise when I stop blathering. She's going to talk to you, then I will probably ask her some questions, and then we will have questions and answers from the audience. It's going to be at least an hour. There are bathrooms right outside, over on that. We all set? In that case, let me welcome back Louise Penny.
Not separately. stars of the show. Suppose you and I take a selfie with everybody in the background. Is that okay?
No selfie with me has ever worked.
Oh. Whereas I always look gorgeous. Of course you do.
Much taller, I won't
Can we
show.
just move this a little bit out of the way? Here we go. All right. Now, if you could hold up, preferably my book. By the way, you know, just in case you think that Barbara is as technologically savvy as she says she is, what Miles has actually been holding is a chocolate bar. Nothing to do with face. All right, here we go. Ready? Oh, yeah. Selfie. All right, here we go. Wait, that's it. People in the world, a good friend, and I got half of her face just like that. It looks like she's like peering over a wall.
Killworms.
No, I'll talk in the mic.
She's going to talk into the mic, and I'm going to say only for Louise what I have presented my back view to all of you.
All right. Hello. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for having me. Poison pen rules. Isn't that the best?
I actually have an introduction that I think is going to be very cool, so she can't have the microphone until I do this. Now, if you're fans, and you all are, I'm assuming, you already know that Louise has been nominated for virtually every award there is. The UK's Bloody Dagger, Canada's Arthur Ellis Award, US awards including the Agatha and the Anthony, and many Best of the Year lists over the years. But what you may not know, and I can't, well, I am speaking for Louise at the moment, but I really shouldn't be speaking for Louise. I think the award that may mean the most to her, she can tell you, is the Order of Canada, one of our country's highest civil honors. When I say our country, this was written in Canada. It was established in 1967, Canada's centennial year, to recognize outstanding achievement, dedication to the community, and service to the nation. On November 21st, 2013, the Order of Canada was awarded to Louise, but she attended her formal investiture on February 17th, 2017. The motto for the Order of Canada is, "They desire a better country." For her contributions to Canadian culture as an author, shining a spotlight on the eastern townships of Quebec, Louise Penny has captured the imaginations of readers in Canada and around the world. Following an 18-year career as a journalist and host of the CBC, she turned to her passion of writing. Her best-selling mysteries set in Quebec's eastern townships have garnered international acclaim and given readers a sense of this region's unique culture. A generous mentor, she fosters the development of her fellow writers and established the Unhanged Arthur for Best Unpublished Novel, an award for aspiring authors. And in case you wonder why it's called the Unhanged Author, the actual award for the Arthur Ellis Award, he was the hangman. So it is, in fact, a person hanged. I like the fact that you have not had a hanging award, but an unhanged award. Anyway, please welcome, well, I've already said please welcome. Please enjoy the program.
Barbara Peters is one of the great, not only booksellers, but book publishers, one of the great figures in American publishing today. So I think I want to applaud her. And you all for coming out. Thank you so much. Just out of interest, how many of you have been to one of my events before? Oh, quite a few. That's great. That's good. What I do want to talk about a little bit is, what I'd love to do is talk for about 20 minutes, 25, maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour. and then open it up for questions. I love the question period part of these events. Well, what I do want to do is just talk to you a little bit about how I came to create Three Pines and the characters and whatnot, and also how the books first came to be in your hands. And also, honestly, I want to start by saying how overwhelming it is to come here and see so many of you. Part of the fear as an author, and something that all authors experience, particularly at the beginning, is having an empty room. I once talked to Mark Billingham. You know Mark Billingham. Do you know Mark Billingham? A wonderful UK author, and he described being at an event, and it was him, and at the table next to him, the conceit in that book was that the book was written by a dog. So they had the dog there, and the dog had this huge lineup, and nobody was standing. So we all, it's like a rite of passage. We all have our humiliation stories. But I wanted to write since I was 8, and I can get into that a little later if you're interested. And I'm sure you are. Fortunately for you, it's a riveting story. But I finally was published, and Still Life finally came out when I was well into my 40s. So I had a number of decades to imagine what an author tour might look like. It would involve a private jet, penthouse suite, interview with Oprah, of course. Michael used to call me a horizontalist, and I would lie in a bubble bath, and I would practice my Oprah Winfrey. Oh, good question, Oprah. We would become best friends, of course, and then I would have to unfriend her because she would become annoying. I had it all mapped out, the entire career. But it was about a week now before Still Life came out, back in 2000. Someone turn this? Anyway, around 2006. And so far, I actually hadn't heard from the publisher. But I wasn't really worried because I knew that these tours must take a lot of his time to organize, and he's hard at work on my tour. So, but I thought maybe I should call him up. So I called him up and I said, well, I'm ready for my tour. And he said, who is this? And I said, well, it's Louise Penny. And he said, well, it's a debut. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody's heard of you. We're not going to send you out. Because nobody's going to want to come and listen to you. And I thought, no, that doesn't sound right. So then I hung up the phone and I said to Michael, my husband, I said, now, why don't we take the entire advance for Still Life, and with it, we will buy lunch. And over lunch, we will talk about sending me on book tour. And God bless him, he said, that's a great idea. So we went to McDonald's. And we designed a tour. And we went all over the United States. And I'm here to tell you that the publisher was right. Nobody showed up. Nobody. Well, Michael was there, of course. And that really, it turned out to be, we're getting a little bit of feedback. That turned out to be not really so bad if nobody shows up, because then you can pretend it's not actually happening. Or it's all part of the plan, because after all, who really wants readers on a book tour? So we could then go out for dinner and we could discuss how lucky we were that nobody showed up. The problem came when one person shows up. Is there anything we can do about the feedback? Yeah, somebody turned it up. They're just now trying to figure out how to turn it down. So the problem came when one person showed up. She's sitting right where you're sitting. And I could tell the moment that she realized that she's alone in the room. There's like this haunting silence behind her. And she turns around. saw a number of tours. So you can imagine how exciting it is for me to walk into this room and see all of you, and that you're actually here. You're not here for the Shapiro wedding, are you? Lock the doors. But as I said, I wanted to write since I was 8, and I can tell you the exact moment it happened. I was a very fearful child. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of heights. I was afraid of holes. I was afraid of bright sunshine. I was afraid of the nighttime, the morning dew, everything. Primarily afraid of other children. I wanted to be in my bedroom alone reading. That's where I felt safe, where I felt sovereign. And I think I can see some of you nodding, because I think many of you felt the same way, probably still do. I do. It's still my favorite place to be, in my bedroom, being the horizontalist, feet up, reading, heaven. But it got to the stage when I was growing up, but when I was naughty, as punishment, my mother would send me outside to play. Now, it's my main fear as a child, and this isn't unusual, I know, were spiders. I'm terrified of spiders. It was probably a phobia. And I happened to be reading. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, and I can still feel it nubbly. I happened to be reading Charlotte's Web. Now, it's possible I was a slightly slow child, because I was about halfway through Charlotte's Web when I realized that Charlotte was a spider. Now, I gotta be fair to my 8-year-old self. I think, dear Lord, please let it be true, that I knew that Charlotte was a spider. But what happened in that instant changed my life. In that moment, I realized I loved Charlotte. I loved the spider. And I didn't want anything bad to happen to Charlotte. And in that instant, my cardinal fear was lifted. And for a child whose entire day was prescribed by doing the least fearful thing, that was magic. That was power beyond imagining. And I understood in that instant that that magic came from storytelling. That magic came from the power of words. And if reading was that powerful, and I became a lifelong reader from that moment on, if reading was that powerful, imagine how powerful writing would be. So I wanted to be a writer. Now, clearly I didn't write my first book at the age of 8 or 9. In fact, I didn't even write my first book at the age of 39. As a fearful child, I grew into a slightly less fearful teenager and a slightly less fearful adult, but still I had fears, and one of them was the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, and the need for accolades. And it was like one of the themes in Waiting for Godot, where they talk about maybe it's best not to test a dream. Because suppose you find out that you can't be the test pilot. Suppose you find out you can't be the ballerina. Suppose you find out you can't write that book. Then not only do you lose the career, but you lose the dream. So maybe it's better to instead manufacture all sorts of excuses instead of actually doing the one thing you really want to do. And that's where I was, because I didn't consciously think this. I didn't say, well, I'm going to sit around and come up with excuses instead of a book. It just happened. Then I met Michael. We got married. I was working at the CBC as a journalist, which was wonderful because I got to listen to people in extreme circumstances as a journalist. But I got tired, I got burned out. You can get burned out listening to being a journalist and listening to God knows and you know politicians for too long. And I dragged myself home one day, and Michael, who saw that I was just really at the end of my tether, said, if you would like to quit work in order to write the book you've always wanted to write. And what he said next was almost as beautiful as when he said, I love you. Not quite as beautiful as that, but almost. What he said was, I'll support you. Isn't that beautiful? Because when you say to someone, I love you, it is the most wonderful thing you could ever hear, absolutely. But there isn't necessarily an act or contract implied. At least not on the part of the woman. The man might have an act implied, but generally. But when you hear, I'll support you, there is an obligation in that. And thank God he meant financially. So I quit work and then immediately suffered 5 years of writer's block. 5 years! 5! 3 seemed enough. 5 was excessive. It got to the stage where poor Michael, he would come home from work. He was the head of hematology at the Montreal Children's. He would come home from work and he stopped asking how the book was going. And you know you're in trouble when they stop asking, right? It was like when I reached 35 and my mother stopped asking if I'd met any nice men lately. Any nice women? Any farm animals? Anything. So Michael stopped asking. But clearly, still life came to be. I had a first book out a few years later. And what happens as a journalist? I'm not going to tell you anything you don't already know, so I apologize for this. But it became apparent as a journalist when covering events that horrific events, while they may appear to happen out of the blue, actually don't. It is kind of a cavalcade of smaller, often apparently unconnected events that have to come together for that one big catastrophic event. But the same with wonderful events. If you look back and you realize, gosh, if I had gone in the other door, I would never have met that person. If I had been wearing a different color, they wouldn't have complimented me and we wouldn't have become best friends or what have you. So it's a number of things have to come together. And the same with having Still Life published. One of the main things was Michael and I moved out of Montreal. And we moved into a small village just south of the Vermont border that some of you might recognize. And then I fell in with a group of women who called themselves Lay Girls. And Lay Girls were, and still are, singers, dancers, poets, artists, musicians, creators. And we would meet once a month, and they would talk about their processes. And I had to explain to them that I'm not a writer. Nothing has come out. And they said, oh, no, you're a writer. It's just, it hasn't happened yet. It became clear listening to them that while the limbs might appear different, the taproot is the same of creativity. So it was so fascinating to listen to them, their struggles, their fears, their failures, their triumphs, the questions they have, and how, as a community, we were all helping each other. They were helping each other, I was listening. And I went to their art openings, and I went to their recitals, and I saw things that were transcendent, that were breathtakingly beautiful and creative and bold. And I saw things that didn't work at all. But you know what? The next morning, they still got out of bed, they put their clothes on, they went down Main Street magnificent. Magnificent. And I learned from them that the trying and failing wasn't going to kill them. What would kill them and what was killing me was the not trying. And that was a key element for me. The final element came again, sitting on my bed. The bed is something of an altar for me. Sitting on, oh, aren't you lucky? Sitting on the bed.
Because the microphone's my name.
I was sitting on the bed and I looked at the bedside table. And you must have the same thing, a huge to-be-read pile, right? Fiction, non-fiction, cookbooks, biographies, all sorts of stuff. Including, probably, because you're here, a lot of crime fiction. And the same with me. And I looked at the bedside table and I saw all this crime fiction. And I realized I was trying to write for the wrong reason. The right deed for the wrong reason. I was trying to write the best book ever so that my mother would be impressed. So that my brothers would stop thinking I was a complete idiot. So that my former professors would be impressed. So that my former colleagues would be jealous. All for other people. Not for myself, but for other people. And what was stopping me from doing it was the fear of failure. Suppose they don't like it. And I understood in that instant, it just came to me, it was, as my friend Oprah would say, an aha moment. That I needed to write a book just for me. I needed to write a book I would read. I would read. Not that any of you would read. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm thrilled that you feel the same way I do. But in order for me to be able to write that first book, I had to write it just for me, and understood in that instant that the contract with my 8-year-old self wasn't that the book be published, not even that the book be any good, just that the book be finished. And then if it wasn't published, I would be disappointed, but I would have no regrets. I could move forward with my life saying I had done it. And that's what happened. I sat down at the kitchen table. I created 3 pines because I understood that there was a pretty good chance it wasn't going to be published, and that probably the only reward I was going to get was going to be in the writing of it. So I had to love the process. It would probably ended up taking me a couple of years to write Still Life. So I had to enjoy every moment because that was the only gift I was going to get out of these books. So I created a village I would love to go to every day. I populated it with characters I would choose as friends, I would want as company. And then it came time to create the main character, Gamache. And I initially he was going to be in his early 30s. He was going to be a man at war with himself, maybe in a bad marriage, maybe struggling with some addiction, probably with a dying dog. I was just going to throw everything at this poor one. And then I thought, well, for heaven's sake, why would I do that? Here I am finally God. I get to create man. I don't even need a rib, I just do it. Why would I create someone so unpleasant? And I didn't really think these books were going to be published. I wanted them to be, but I didn't think they were going to be, so I made another selfish decision. I decided I would create a man I would marry. That's it. And I gave him all the qualities I admire, not just in a man, but in a human being. Integrity, courage, humor. Someone who is happier carrying a book than a gun. Someone who's never going to be mistaken for the head of a SWAT team, but more likely to be mistaken for a college professor. Someone who is kind, who understands that it takes a whole lot more courage to be kind than to be cruel. Anyone can find fault. We can all find fault. You read Glass Houses, you're going to find faults. And I sometimes get emails from people saying, you know, on page 132, you know, this is misspelled or something, and I think that's probably true, thank you very much. But what about the other pages? That's one word out of 120,000. You're really going to pick that out? And but you know, some people are wired that way. But it takes, when given that decision tree to find fault or to be kind, it takes a lot more courage to be kind. And Gamache knows that. It's the courage to have goodness in your life. These books are about many things, as you know, but probably least among them is the murder. They're not about death, they're about life. And while they are about terror, and they're about fear, and they are about a deep and profound grief, they are finally about community, about belonging, and about goodness. And that's why they give me so much pleasure to write. And I hope it gives you pleasure to read as well. Why don't I open it up for questions now? Does that sound good now that I've sort of set out the template for it?
I get to ask the first question. Actually, since Louise was giving you kind of an origin story, I thought that we might spend a moment telling you about the origin story of Louise and the Poison Pen.
Yes.
You may not know this, but Louise's book, Still Life, was first published by Headline in the United Kingdom. Do you have that right? Yes, in Canada, you're right. And because we are such a big seller of British books, Headline sent me what's called an advanced reading copy. So I'm one of the few people in the United States, maybe the only person at that point in the United States who got to read Still Life. and I fell in love with it. Now, what is it that you fall in love with most as a reader when you open an author's work for the first time? For me, it's the voice. Sorry, it's not the characters, it's the voice. Who is speaking to me, and do I really want to have this conversation throughout the book? And Louise's voice just won me over. The difficulty was, how was I going to get Still Life? They probably, do you remember how many they printed?
Oh, I think of Still Life, I think they printed 1,500.
Right.
For worldwide, to go worldwide,
It was
1,000.
limited. It was a really limited numbers.
Which is why we had to take out a loan for the McDonald's lunch.
So in any case, I was able to order a significant number of Still Life, but Louise is living in Canada. She is not, as you've already heard, on book tour. And what was I going to do about that? There's a wonderful bookstore in Toronto called Sleuth of Baker Street. Some years ago, my husband, 20 years ago, we actually swapped bookstores for 2 weeks. Rob and I went to Canada and ran Sleuth of Baker Street, and Marion and J.D. came to Scottsdale and ran the Poison Pen. We only did it once because we did this exchange in July. But in any case, I wrote an impassioned plea to my friends in Sleuth of Baker Street, and I said, I have read this amazing book called Still Life by this author, and they said, really? We haven't heard of it. And I said, well, here's the deal. I said, if I had my copies shipped to you and you could now buy all the rest of them, would you invite Louise in to sign those books, and then you could ship them to us here in the United States? How about that? So it was sometime later before Still Life was published.
It was a yearling.
Yeah, in the United States. But when I say that Louise has signed all of her books for the Poison Pen, not every one of them here in Scottsdale, but literally all of her books, that is the reason. And I've never really had a chance to tell you how much I appreciated your going to all the trouble to do that.
Well, I mean, talk about trouble. This is, well, she's trouble to begin with. But I've never forgotten that. Well, you know, as a debut author, that I get so excited about, or I got so excited, I have the book, and then I remember thinking, suppose nobody buys it. Suppose nobody likes it. And the first person I heard from was J.D. talking about this woman, Barbara Peters, from Poison Pen in Arizona, who wanted the ARCs. I was overjoyed, and you have been a supporter from the very beginning, and that's potent. You were the one who seeded the United States, so thank you.
About me, but rather to illustrate for you that Louise's talk about how difficult it is for a first-time author to reach an audience. It depends on so many things, and one of them is kind of just chance. You know, luck. You have to hope that an Oprah person, would be a very poor version, but I'm the Scottsdale version, actually likes your book.
No, you're right. You're right. If you don't have a Barbara Peters behind you, or somebody like either Barbara Peters or someone similar, and there aren't very many people who are in the industry. Barbara failed to mention this. In the industry, they're called big mouths. Big mouths, for obvious reasons. Because they spread the
I
word.
could have gone all afternoon.
Because they spread the word, and that's what you want as an author. You need, and how did you come to it? Probably because either Barbara or a friend told you. That's how I've come to books, is a friend will say to me, you need to read this book, or my independent bookstore will. It's word of mouth. If you don't have word of mouth, you can actually have lots of, I mean, I'm a big fan of librarians and libraries. But you can have a whole bunch of that. But if a librarian isn't saying, you need to read this book, you have no career.
So this is your 13th novel, 13th Armand Gamache, and he has progressed in various ways through the hierarchy of the Société de Québec. But this book has an interesting structure in that you actually start in a courtroom where he is testifying, and then you zigzag back and forth in time. Why did you decide to write it that way?
Well, it was a number of reasons, actually, and it's clear right from the first words of the first page, so we're not giving anything away. One was that when you reach 13 in the series, I'm extremely aware of the dangers of becoming formulaic, and I don't want to either intentionally or unintentionally fall into a rut. So I always try, and I want to become a better writer as well, so I want to always challenge myself and push myself and see, can it be done? So that was from the professional and personal point of view, that was one of the reasons. The other reason was that we hadn't yet seen, all the other books stopped with Gamache or one of his cohorts making the arrest. So we hadn't seen what happens next. So I wanted to see him. I thought, now wouldn't that be interesting? What happens if you put Gamache on the stand? And then he starts being pounded by questions, and sometimes uncomfortable questions. How does he react? How do we react as the reader? And I also thought, too, it was interesting structurally to essentially start at the end. So we're at the trial. We don't know yet who's been murdered. We don't know who is on trial. And so it goes back and forth as he's describing the events in Three Pines that led up to the trial. Then we go back in time. It was an interesting, I don't know if you're particularly interested in this, but I found it, you're going to hear it anyway. I found it, one of the challenges, of course, was distinguishing when we were in the past and when we're in the present. And I really struggled with that because you don't want to keep saying, meanwhile, 6 months ago. Nor did I want it to be chapter by chapter, so that one chapter is in the courthouse, another chapter is back in Three Pines, and then I wanted it to be, if any of you have read Bury Your Dead, where there was a kind of a seamless, I'm hoping, weaving between past and present, between what's real and what's imaginary. I wanted it to be sort of like that, so that it was seamless. As he's testifying, then we go back into the past, and then from the past we dip back up. So I wanted it to be more like that than compartmentalizing. That was actually quite difficult, and I finally, it wasn't until I was about 2/3 of the way, maybe even further, through the first draft, it's working, but it's still confusing, and God knows you don't need that. I finally realized what I should do is that it had to be set in different seasons. And that was just so simple. So that the courtroom is in sweltering July heat. Perhaps not as sweltering as you're used to. Montreal still can get pretty hot, and particularly when the air conditioning breaks down, as it has, thankfully, in the courtroom, so I was able to describe it. And the other scene that he's describing happens around Halloween. And so suddenly they're wearing sweaters, or the fireplace is lit, or something without saying, it's cold outside, you're just describing it. So I always think that reading and writing are equally creative. And that the beauty of the community that we build as readers and writers is that there is an ecosystem, so that I suggest and you fill in.
It's even more complicated than that, because every single person in this room who's going to read your book is actually reading a different book, because they read what they bring to it.
That's a
so
really
you
good
will
point.
all have a different experience. However, I can't promise you when or even if we'll actually do it, but Louise and I were discussing at lunch the possibility of her coming back in a few months after some book, not necessarily this one, and we would do a program in which you have to have read the book before you come, or you won't be.
So then I can talk to that.
Because one of the most frustrating things about doing this right on the eve of publication or shortly thereafter is we can't really talk to you about many of the things that we like the best in the book, because it will ruin the experience for you. And I would like to suggest to you, if you haven't, don't go online or read reviews about this book, because if you do, some of them are giving away too much, and you will have a better experience reading this book if you go into it without knowing anything. When I get a copy from the publisher, the first thing I do is throw away absolutely everything that comes with it that tells me what I should think about the book. And they all do, because I want to come to it, just like a virgin. So, well, how often do I get to be one anymore? I think it's really important that you don't have a preconceived take, on what the book is about. Now, one more question.
I just want to throw in, that reminded me of the great line about about, was it Mae West? Someone said, was it Gretchen Marks who said, I knew her before she was a virgin? I knew Barbara before she was a virgin.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about, I don't want to really give away what it is, but I think of you, and in fact most writers, as sort of a magpie, in the sense that you're out and about in the world, and you see something, read something, you know, and you think, that would really be a good thing to put into a book. And in this book, without saying what it is particularly, that clearly is what happened.
That's absolutely true. Magpie is a wonderful way of putting it, actually. I sometimes think of it as almost like a Frankenstein, but I prefer magpie. I'm taking bits and pieces of what I see and fashioning a whole. That's absolutely true. I walk around, and I have it in the hotel room, with a notebook, and I make notes on some quotes, some of the turns of phrases I hear. If I run up against a theme of poetry, something I'm reading, something in the news, absolutely. A description of a person. I'll say, I love people watching, a description of what they're like, description of heat, what heat feels like. Because I often, I mean, it sounds silly, but I'm writing in the winter. So if the book is set at the height of summer, it's helpful to go back and say, this is what the skin felt like to be out in 100 and whatever it is today, 1,000 degrees. For a Canadian, that's converting to Celsius.
It's not 120, which it has been. There's no heat advisory out. Is there? No, we're past the heat advisory.
Or is there a hubbub?
Haboob. Oh, really, sorry you're missing the haboob, because that is...
What a great name!
That. I know, I like this term. But in any way, I asked that question in part to head off anyone who might want to ask Louise, where do you get your ideas, which is the single question that we hear the most and wish we never heard. But we have the answer.